Are you tired tonight, friend? Has the day felt long, heavier than usual? Maybe your soul is aching in ways you can't quite explain. Maybe you've carried too much for too long, but you've come to the right place. You don't have to hold it all anymore. Tonight, I'll tell you a quiet story about an old man named Elias who lived by a river, and how, through long days and silent nights, Jesus came to him gently, faithfully, until the very end. So don't rush, don't worry. You can rest now. Let the world grow quiet around you. Let your heart soften and come sit by the fire. The Lord is near, and He's been waiting just for you. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Psalm 23:2-3. The river didn't speak in words, but Elias had learned to listen to it anyway. It had been many years since the cabin had heard another voice besides his own. Tucked gently in a bend of the river bank, shaded by sycamore trees and framed by the hush of pine and wind, the place had become something of a holy shelter. A place to grow old in silence and perhaps in peace. Tonight, as the sky deepened into that sleepy blue between dusk and dark, Elias sat outside on the old wooden bench, wrapped in his patchy wool shawl, and held a cup of warm tea between his hands. Steam curled upward like a prayer that had no words left in it. He could feel the ache behind his ribs again. Not pain, just a quiet pressing. Maybe you know the feeling too. That low, soft weight of memory, of regrets not shouted but whispered. It doesn't hurt exactly, but it lingers, like fog over water. And yet, the river didn't mind. It flowed as it always had, slow, steady, without judgment. It accepted him, listened, received, not just the man he was today, old and faded, but the boy he once had been, the husband he once was, the father he almost became. That evening he did what he often did. He began to talk, not loudly, just enough for the words to reach the Lord. Jesus, he whispered, not even sure if his voice reached past the air. It's been a long day. A long life, really. I don't need answers anymore. I just don't want to be alone tonight. There was no reply, at least not in the way the world would recognize. No booming voice from heaven, no sudden wind. Just the river, lapping softly at the bank. Just the trees, sighing like an old friend who had heard the same story many times and never minded hearing it again. Elias looked up at the sky. A single star had already appeared above the tree line. Gentle and faithful, like it always had. He thought about Martha again, his wife, gone now for 15 years, maybe more. Time wasn't something he counted much these days. She used to sit beside him here in this very spot. Her laughter had been the music of early summer. He missed her. Not just for what she was, but for how he was when he was with her. Lighter, kinder, more alive. Do you think she remembers me? He asked the dark. Then, after a pause, do you? Reflective pause. Take a deep breath. Let the stillness find you. You don't have to carry it all alone. That's when he heard it. Not a sound, really, more like a presence. There, in the flickering firelight and hush of the pines, he felt warmth in his chest, not from tea, but from something deeper, something holy. He closed his eyes, and in that space between waking and sleep, he imagined a man sitting beside him, not saying anything, just being there. Sandals dusty, robe simple, face gentle and tired like his own. Jesus didn't rush, he didn't preach. He simply sat down, close enough for Elias to feel the heat of his nearness. And then, the most surprising thing happened. The man took Elias's cup of tea, lifted it slowly and drank from it, as if to say, I share this with you. Your weariness, your quiet, your longing. And then he looked at Elias, eyes tender as starlight, and said just one thing. I heard your cry. Elias didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat tightened with something old and beautiful. Instead, he let the moment settle. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel forgotten. He felt seen. Not for what he had done or failed to do, but simply for being here, now, in this night. And that was enough. When he finally rose to go inside, he left the bench slowly, glancing once more at the river. It was still flowing, always flowing. He whispered a final prayer without words, just a breath, just a sigh. And inside, he lit a small oil lamp near the window. Its soft light glowed like a quiet promise. Bedtime takeaway. You are not forgotten. Your soul is heard. Even in silence, the Lord is near. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. Isaiah 42:3. The wind had quieted by the time Elias drew the blanket over his shoulders. Inside the small wooden cabin, everything was simple. A chair by the hearth, a worn Bible on the table, a few dishes stacked neatly. The kind of stillness you could only hear when the world no longer needed anything from you. He moved slowly now. His bones didn't like the cold and lit the lamp by the window. It was a small thing, a glass globe with a flickering wick inside. Fed by oil, he pressed himself from olives brought once a year by a kind neighbor from the village beyond the woods. The candle had become a ritual, night after night, year after year. Elias lit it, and he never really knew why. Maybe you have your rituals too, the things you keep doing even when no one else sees. A prayer before bed, a photo on the wall, a habit of kindness no one claps for. The candle wasn't for him exactly, it was for her. Martha, she used to light it every evening without fail. Even on the hard days, even when he didn't come home until after dark from the sawmill, tired and short-tempered. Even when their arguments had left them in silence, she'd still light it. I just want you to see the light when you're coming home, she once said, smiling faintly over a pot of stew. And now she was gone. But the candle still stood by the window, as if still waiting. That night, Elias sat near it, hands folded in his lap, eyes fixed on the small flickering flame. It wasn't large, it barely lit the room. And yet, it glowed with something more than wax and wick. He closed his eyes and spoke softly. Lord, if I'm honest, I don't know why I keep lighting it. She's not coming back, and most nights, no one passes by to even see it. Silence. Then the fire gave a tiny pop, like an answer. And in that quiet warmth, Elias remembered something. A night, long ago, when he was the one who had left. It was after a fight, a hard one. He had slammed the door and walked out into the dark, grumbling against God and life and everything in between. He hadn't known where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay. The anger had filled him like smoke in a chimney, hot and choking. Hours passed, but when he came back, near midnight, she was there. Not waiting at the door, not scolding, just sitting by the fire, and the candle was still burning in the window. He asked her, "Why are you still awake?" She had looked up, her voice so calm, so sure. "I knew you'd come home. The light helps you find your way." Reflective pause. Take a moment here. Think of a light in your life, someone, something that never gave up on you. Let the warmth of that thought fill your heart. Elias opened his eyes. The candle still flickered gently in the glass. A tear had slipped down his cheek without asking permission. He didn't wipe it away. He didn't need to. That night, he whispered something into the room, not loud, not dramatic, just a soft confession. "I'm still finding my way home." And though there was no voice, no flash of miracle, the light in the window danced just a little brighter, as if someone had heard. Later, as he lay in bed under the quilt she had sewn years ago, he stared at the ceiling beams and smiled. Not a big smile, just enough. Somewhere in the night, he sensed it again, that quiet presence. Not beside him this time, but around him, like a gentle hand resting on the shoulder, like a watchful gaze by the door, like a flame that wouldn't go out even when the world grew dark. Bedtime takeaway. Sometimes the smallest light is enough to guide you home, and God never stops leaving it on for you. Behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Matthew 28:20. It was the kind of night where the cold settled into the bones early, even with the fire crackling gently in the hearth. Elias could feel it in his knees, his shoulders, the soft ache behind his eyes. He moved slower that evening, shuffling across the cabin with a blanket draped over his shoulders. A stew simmered on the stove, just carrots, potatoes, a bit of thyme. Simple, earthy, the kind of food that filled more than the stomach. It gave comfort, familiarity. He ate slowly. By the time he set the bowl aside, the wind had grown quiet. Still. Not a silence that felt empty, but one that felt full. Elias reached for his cup of tea and walked to the door. The stars were out, laid across the sky like scattered diamonds on velvet. He stepped out into the night. The river moved in its slow rhythm, steady and unhurried, as if it had nowhere else to be, just here, just now. He settled onto the bench outside, the fire pit still glowing from earlier. With a few twigs, he coaxed the embers back into flame, and then he waited. For nothing in particular, for everything. That's when he felt it again. That holy stillness, a presence, not seen, but sensed, like the way your skin feels when a warm breeze passes, or how the room changes when someone you love walks in. He looked up, and there, across from him on the other side of the fire, sat a man. He wasn't startled. Somehow, he knew. Somehow deep in his old heart, he understood. It was him. Jesus. Not robed in shining light, not surrounded by angels or glowing with glory, just a man, a traveler. His robe simple, his hair touched by dust, his face quiet. And yet everything in him shone, not outwardly but from within. Jesus didn't say anything right away. He reached forward toward the fire, warming his hands just as Elias was doing. Two men, one fire, no words. And for a long time, that was enough. Elias stared into the flames. His voice trembled when he spoke. "I never expected you to come like this." Jesus looked up, smiling gently. "You called?" Elias lowered his eyes. "I didn't mean to. I don't even know what I said." "You said you were tired." A log popped in the fire. Sparks lifted into the dark like tiny prayers. Elias chuckled softly. I suppose I'm always tired now. Jesus leaned back, still smiling. It's okay to be tired. Reflective pause. Let yourself breathe right here. Let go of the need to have the right words. Jesus hears even your sighs. They sat for a long while in that soft, golden hush. Elias wanted to ask 100 things. Why suffering? Why silence? Why do the ones we love leave too soon? But none of those questions felt urgent now. They were like leaves drifting down a river, not needing to be held, just noticed, then let go. Instead, Elias asked something simpler. Do you come to many people like this? Jesus looked into the fire. I come to all who make space for me. Elias swallowed gently. Even if they've wasted years. Jesus nodded. Even if they're full of regret. Yes, Elias took a slow breath. Even if they don't feel worthy. Jesus turned to him, and his eyes, so calm, so steady, met Elias's. No one who comes to me is ever turned away. And just like that, Elias wept. Not loudly, not with drama. Just soft tears that ran down his weathered cheeks like rain over old wood. They weren't tears of guilt or shame. They were tears of release. He had held so much for so long, carried burdens too heavy for an old man, and here, in the presence of Jesus, he let them fall. All of them. Without needing to explain, when he finally looked up again, the fire was burning low. Jesus was still there, but he didn't speak anymore. He just stayed, until Elias leaned back, eyes heavy, breath slowing. And as he drifted into sleep, he heard the quiet whisper of the Lord not in his ears, but in his soul. I'm not here to teach you something tonight. I'm just here to be with you. Bedtime takeaway: Jesus doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes he simply comes and stays. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. Psalm 145:8. There was a drawer Elias hadn't opened in years. It sat beneath the small table by the window just beside the oil lamp, tucked neatly beneath folded linens and the old tin box of sewing needles Martha once used. The drawer stuck sometimes. He had to pull it gently, rocking it back and forth. It creaked like an old voice clearing its throat. Inside was a letter. Just one, folded twice, yellowing at the edges. The ink smudged faintly in places. It had no stamp, no envelope, only a name on the front written in his own handwriting. Jonah, his son. There are wounds that time doesn't erase, not because they're too deep, but because they were never really opened, never cleaned, just buried. This letter was one of those wounds. Elias hadn't meant to keep it this long. He'd written it a decade ago, maybe more, on a late winter night when the silence in the cabin was louder than usual. That night, the grief had been too much, and so he wrote. He hadn't seen Jonah since the boy the man had left. There'd been a fight. Like most long hurts, it had started with something small. A disagreement about money, then a word too sharp, a slammed door, then silence. Years of it. At first, Elias had told himself Jonah would come back, that he just needed time. But then birthdays came and went. So did Christmas. So did the funeral. Jonah never returned. That night, Elias sat at the table with the letter in his hands. The fire was low, the room quiet. He unfolded the page slowly, as if it were made of something fragile, and he began to read it again. Jonah, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know where you are or if you even care to hear from me. But tonight, I need to say a few things. I was a hard man. Son, I know that. You didn't need to tell me. I knew it every time I looked in the mirror, every time I watched you walk away, knowing I gave you more silence than love. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought work and discipline would be enough. I thought being strong meant not showing sorrow. But now I know it wasn't strength. It was fear. I feared being weak. I feared failing you. And I did anyway. You were a good boy, not perfect, but good. And I'm sorry for all the times I didn't say it. I'm sorry for the years I wasted trying to make you into something instead of simply loving who you already were. I miss you. That's all. I miss you, and I'm still your father. With love, Dad. Elias folded the letter again. His hands shook a little. He'd never sent it. He had told himself Jonah wouldn't care, that it was too late, that a letter wouldn't change anything. But tonight, he wasn't so sure. Maybe it was the dream of Jesus beside the fire. Maybe it was just the candlelight, or maybe something deeper, something holy. Elias looked toward the shelf where his Bible sat. He reached for it, not to search, not to study, but to hold. Like one holds a friend's hand in the dark, he whispered into the room, "Lord, is it too late for love?" The answer didn't come in words. It came in memory. A verse from long ago, one he had once underlined in blue pencil. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. Yes, there had been silence. Yes, there had been distance. But grace was longer than both. Reflective pause. Close your eyes if you're able. Think of someone you've loved, but let time, or pain, or pride create distance. Now invite God into that space, even if they're gone, even if it's been years. Healing is still possible. That night, Elias left the letter unfolded on the table. He didn't rewrite it, he didn't burn it. He just left it there, open and visible, a quiet offering. And before going to bed, he whispered one last thing. Not to Jonah, but to God. Send this to him, if you can. Maybe Jonah would never read it, but maybe somehow the Father of Mercy could still carry words across distances the postman couldn't reach. And that hope, that whisper of healing was enough for tonight. Bedtime takeaway. There is no distance love cannot cross when placed in God's hands. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. Psalm 42:1. The snow came early that year. Not the harsh kind that bites and buries, but the quiet snow, soft and slow, falling like feathers shaken from heaven. It covered the ground gently, as though not wanting to disturb anything beneath. Elias woke to the world wrapped in white. From the window, the river looked smaller, narrower, like it had been tucked in beneath a heavy quilt of frost. The trees stood like ancient watchers in coats of snow, their bare limbs trembling lightly in the cold. He boiled water for tea, then sat by the window, his breath fogging the glass. It was a lonely sort of morning, the kind that made one ache for a voice across the table, a hand reaching for yours, a second cup being poured. He closed his eyes just for a moment, and when he opened them again, there she was, a deer. She stood a little beyond the firewood pile, delicate and still, a doe. Her coat was thick and dusted with snowflakes, her breath rising gently from flared nostrils. She was watching him, or rather watching the cabin. Elias didn't move. He knew the way of wild things, how sudden sound or movement could turn them to flight. But she didn't seem afraid. Not really, just curious, like a visitor who'd been here before. He stayed at the window, hands cupped around his tea, and in that still moment, something ancient stirred in his chest. A longing, a peace, a strange familiarity. The doe stepped closer. You learn in old age to treasure the unexpected, to not rush the moment, to let it unfold like soft pages in an old book. She moved slowly, almost reverently, toward the front of the cabin, then paused. For a moment, Elias wondered if she'd run, but instead, she laid down, right there, just by the stone path, curled in the snow, calm as if she'd always belonged. He felt his breath catch. Years ago, when Martha was still here, she had told him something odd. One night by the fire, as snow tapped against the windows, she had whispered, "If I ever go before you, I'll send a deer to visit you, just so you'll know I'm okay, and that you are too." He had laughed then, brushed it off as one of her gentle fancies. But now, seeing this creature so quiet, so near, he wasn't laughing. He was remembering. He rose slowly, careful not to startle her, and opened the cabin door just enough to feel the full breath of winter. Cold wrapped around him instantly, but he didn't mind. The doe looked up at the movement. Their eyes met, and in that soft gaze, he saw something more than an animal. He saw calm, he saw gentleness, he saw presence. He didn't speak, there was no need. Instead, he whispered silently, not with his lip but with his heart, "I see you, Lord, even in this, even in her." Reflective pause, breathe in the stillness. Let it remind you God speaks, even through the quietest creatures. He reaches us not just in scripture, but in snowflakes, in starlight, in the gaze of a deer. Elias closed the door slowly, leaving it unlatched just in case the visitor wished to stay longer. Back inside, the fire crackled in the hearth. The lamp flickered gently. And for once, the silence did not feel empty. It felt full of memory and full of love, full of God. That evening, he wrote one small line in the back of his Bible. "She came to visit me today." He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. Bedtime takeaway. Sometimes God sends his love not with thunder, but on the quiet steps of a creature who simply rests beside us. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Isaiah 43:2. Behind the cabin, beneath a wide sheet of canvas and years of dust, sat something that had been both dream and delay. A boat, or almost a boat. It had no name, no paint, no oars resting beside it. But the shape was there. The body. The intention. Years ago, 15, maybe 20, Elias had begun to build it with his own hands. Back then, the idea had seemed noble, romantic even. He imagined long, slow days drifting down the river with Martha beside him, her laughter echoing off the water, her hair tied up under a sun hat. They would fish, they would read, they would pray in silence. The kind of boat that didn't need to go fast, just far enough to feel free. He had worked on it through one summer, measured each plank, carved the ribs by hand. But then Martha grew sick, and when the leaves turned that fall, the boat remained on its sawhorses, unfinished, untried, unsent. This morning, something inside Elias nudged him. He put on his thick coat, gloves, and stepped out back. The snow had melted under the eaves, revealing the edges of the canvas. He stood there for a long while before lifting the cover. There she was, still intact. Weather-worn, yes, dusty, but not ruined. His fingers traced the edge of the bow. The wood was dry but solid and still waiting, still hoping. Maybe. How many things do we start and never finish? Not out of laziness, but because life comes, a pain interrupts, grief rearranges. We carry hopes like that boat unfinished, half buried, waiting under the weight of time and loss. Elias sat down on the edge of the frame. The sun peeked through the clouds, spilling gold over the slope of the hill toward the river. And for the first time in years, he imagined again. Not grand adventures, not bold journeys. Just floating. Him and Jesus. Not even speaking. Just drifting down the water in silence. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. What would you even say to me in a boat, Lord? Then paused. Then whispered, No, you wouldn't say anything, or you'd just sit beside me. The thought made his eyes wet. Years ago, he had told himself it wasn't worth finishing, that there was no one left to share it with. But this morning, he wasn't so sure. Reflective pause. Close your eyes gently. Is there something in your life you left unfinished, a dream, a calling, a prayer? It's okay. God doesn't measure you by what you complete, but by what you carry in love. Elias didn't decide anything that day. He didn't grab his tools. He didn't make big promises to sand or seal or set sail. He just laid his hand on the boat one more time and said, Thank you for letting me remember. Then before going back inside, he looked once more toward the river. The water shimmered in the morning light. It hadn't stopped flowing, and neither, he suspected, had grace. Bedtime takeaway. The boat may still be waiting, but so is Jesus, not for what you'll do, but simply to sit beside you on the waters of your soul. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. It wasn't pain. Not exactly, just restlessness, the kind that creeps in quietly when the body is still but the heart won't settle. He turned in bed beneath the patchwork quilt, watching the shadows on the wooden ceiling shift with the glow of the fireplace. The lamp near the window had long since gone out. Only the coals in the hearth kept watch now. Sometimes, old memories come out when the world is dark and the soul is tired. He thought of his younger years, the sound of boots in the sawdust mill, the weight of long hours, the way the ache in his back had become part of him, like a scar he no longer questioned. He had always been a worker, a provider, a man who showed love not with words but with doing, stacking wood, fixing hinges, bringing home the bacon. But now, there wasn't much to do. And in the quiet, he often wondered if that meant he had lost his worth. Tonight, that thought lingered longer than usual. Like a splinter beneath the skin, he sat up, feet touching the wooden floor, cold against his soles. The fire popped gently, and the wind outside brushed against the windows like a tired breath. He whispered into the room, Lord, what do I do when I can't be useful anymore? No answer, just stillness. He poured himself some water and returned to his chair by the fire, wrapping the blanket over his shoulders. The Bible lay on the nearby table. He picked it up, not to study, not to search, but to let it open wherever it chose. His fingers moved softly across the pages, and there his eyes landed. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He read it once, then again, and slowly the tears came, not from sadness, but relief. Because in that verse, he felt seen, not for what he'd done, not for what he could no longer do, but simply as a soul weary, aching, and beloved. He leaned back, letting the warmth of the fire and the weight of those words sink in. He closed his eyes, and suddenly, he was there again. Jesus, sitting across from him. Same calm eyes, same dusty robe, same quiet nearness. But this time, he spoke first. "You've done enough." Elias opened his mouth, wanting to protest. But Jesus continued, voice soft and steady. "You don't have to prove anything to me. I didn't come for what you could build, I came for you." Elias nodded slowly. "I've spent my whole life trying to earn my place." Jesus reached out a hand across the space between them. "You already have it. No sermon, no correction, just invitation. Come to me," he whispered again. And Elias, old, tired, worn by years, let his soul do just that. He didn't rise, he didn't kneel. He simply rested. Right there, in the presence that asked for nothing but his heart. Reflective pause. Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders soften. You don't have to do more. You don't have to be more. Right now, this moment, just come. That night, Elias fell asleep in his chair, the fire glowing low, the verse still open beside him. He didn't dream of boats or deer or regrets. He simply rested, in the arms of the one who loved him before he ever lifted a finger. Bedtime takeaway. You are not valuable because of what you do. You are valuable because of whose you are, and he says, "Come, child, rest." There is a time for everything. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to mourn and a time to dance. Ecclesiastes 3:1-2-4. There was a tree not far from the cabin. It stood on a small rise near the bend in the river, half wrapped in ivy and bare from winter. Elias could see it clearly from his front window, its branches stretched wide, crooked in some places, noble in others. It wasn't beautiful in the usual way. No blossoms, no fresh bark, no symmetrical limbs. But it had stood through countless winters. That counted for something. Elias had come to call it the waiting tree, because every year, doing without fail, it seemed to hold its breath until spring, even when spring seemed late in coming. And this year, winter had been long, the kind of winter that settled into the bones of everything. That morning, Elias walked out wrapped in his thick coat and scarf. The wind was low, the sky gray, the ground wet with old snow melting at the edges. He made his way slowly up the small hill to the tree. It looked the same, still, stubborn, bare. He touched its bark gently. It was rough, cracked in places, and yet, beneath his palm, there was something steady, alive. "You're waiting too? Huh," he murmured with a soft chuckle. In his younger years, Elias hadn't been good at waiting. He wanted things done, fixed, answered. But lately, God had been teaching him another rhythm, a slower one, a truer one, like the tree. He sat at its base, folding his hands in his lap, listening to the faint rustle of branches above him. "Do you ever get tired of waiting, Lord?" he whispered. And somewhere inside, a thought rose gently. "I wait for you, too." It stopped him. So much of his life had been about reaching, striving, doing. But what if part of love, real love, was waiting? Not in frustration, not in punishment, but in tenderness. Like a father watching the road for a son who isn't ready yet. Like a savior sitting beside a soul who doesn't yet believe he's near. Like the tree, waiting for spring, even if it can't feel the thaw yet. Reflective pause. Close your eyes. Let this question pass through you softly. What if God is not impatient with your healing? What if He is content to wait until you're ready to bloom again? Elias stayed by the tree longer than he planned. He traced one of its low branches with his hand and noticed something surprising. At the tip, barely visible, a tiny bud. Not large, not loud, but it was there. Life, still sleeping, but near. He smiled. "Okay," he whispered, rising to his feet. "I'll wait too." Back at the cabin, he made tea and returned to the window. From there, the waiting tree stood firm against the gray sky. And though the snow hadn't fully melted, he knew spring was on its way. Not quickly, but faithfully. Bedtime takeaway. Even in your longest winters, God has not forgotten you. You're not dead. You're waiting. And spring always comes. After the fire came a gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. There were no dreams that night. No flickering visions of Jesus beside the fire. No tender deer resting in the snow. No voice calling softly from Scripture. Only stillness. Elias had gone to bed as usual, folding the quilt over his shoulders, whispering a short prayer, half spoken, half thought, be near, Lord. But when morning came, he couldn't remember anything between the two moments. Just blank space. Just silence. It unsettled him, not because anything was wrong, but because he'd come to expect a kind of holy echo in the quiet. Somewhere in these long, slow evenings, he had begun to feel God not just as an idea, but as a presence. And now that presence felt distant. He made tea as the sky turned soft with early light. Sat at his table, looked toward the river. No movement, no sound. Just the cabin, just him, and silence. He opened the Bible, expecting something to stir. But the page that met his eyes was one he'd read dozens of times before. Nothing stood out. No line leapt. No word burned bright. He closed it gently and set it aside. "I thought you'd meet me this morning," Elias whispered to the empty room. "I thought you might say something." But the only reply was the ticking of the old clock on the shelf. He poured a second cup of tea and sat down again. For many people, silence is empty, lonely, barren. But that morning, Elias decided to sit in it. Not fill it, not fight it, just let it be. The minutes passed, maybe hours. He listened to the wind brushing the side of the house, to the creak of the beams as the sun rose higher, to the stillness between breaths. And something began to shift. Not outside him, but within. There, in the hush, he realized. God wasn't absent. He was quiet. And maybe that was the holiest thing of all. A memory rose, slow and gentle, of the prophet Elijah on the mountain, hiding in fear. There had been wind and earthquake and fire, but God had not been in those. He had come in a whisper. And sometimes even the whisper is wordless. Just presence, just nearness, just being. Reflective pause. Let go of the need to hear something profound. Let go of the pressure to feel something spiritual. Be still and know. Silence is not God's absence. It may be His gentlest form of love. Elias didn't speak much that day. He didn't write in his journal, didn't fix anything, and didn't pray long prayers. He just lived. He peeled an orange slowly, swept the floor with care, watched the river from his porch. And by evening, he smiled, because the silence had become something else. Company. Bedtime takeaway. When God is quiet, He's not far, He's resting with you in the sacred hush. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." John 21:12. That night, Elias dreamed. It wasn't vivid like some dreams, no bright colors or loud voices, just warmth, just firelight, and the smell of bread. He was sitting by the river again, but it looked different in the dream, wider, quieter, as if it belonged more to heaven than to earth. The trees leaned in gently. The water didn't rush. It hummed. A small fire crackled near the shore. The stones around it were warm and smooth, and someone had already gathered wood. He wasn't alone. Jesus was there, not speaking, just tending the fire. He sat cross-legged, sleeves rolled up, eyes calm, as he turned a simple piece of bread over the coals. There was fish too fresh and fragrant laid gently on a flat stone. Elias watched, unsure whether to move or speak. But Jesus looked up, smiled softly, and said, "You're just in time." No theology, no parable, just breakfast. He motioned for Elias to sit. The grass was soft beneath him. A cup of warm drink was pressed into his hands, maybe tea, maybe something else. It didn't matter. He held it and breathed it in, felt his shoulders lower, felt safe. Jesus tore the bread, handed him a piece. "You must be hungry," he said. Elias nodded, but the hunger wasn't just for food. It was for something deeper, something the world hadn't fed in years. They ate in silence for a while. The crackling fire on the hush of the river, now two friends sharing what was enough. Then Jesus said gently, "You've been carrying more than just age." Elias lowered his eyes. He wanted to say something about guilt, about regret, about all the things he wished he had done differently. But Jesus continued, "I know." No lecture, no list of what needed fixing. Just those two words, "I know." And then, "Let it go. You fed others your whole life. Now let me feed you." Elias closed his eyes, and when he opened them, the dream had faded. He was back in his room. The fire in the hearth had dimmed to a soft glow, but he could still smell the bread, still feel the warmth, still taste the kindness. He smiled in the dark, because sometimes in the holiest moment isn't a miracle, but a meal. Reflective pause. Breathe slowly. Let this question rest in you. What if Jesus is not asking for performance tonight, but simply offering you breakfast? That morning, Elias made a fresh loaf of bread. He didn't know why exactly, only that it felt right. He sliced it slowly and buttered it, sat near the window, and before eating, he whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for feeding me." Bedtime takeaway. Jesus does not come only in crisis. Sometimes he just sits with you and serves you bread by the fire. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. Psalm 55:22. It had been there for years. A rock half-buried, moss-covered, resting in the middle of Elias's small garden behind the cabin. Too large to ignore, but too heavy to lift. He had tried once, long ago, back when his body was stronger and his pride still insisted on proving something. But it hadn't moved, not an inch. He had grunted and strained, wedged boards beneath it, tried water, leverage, even prayer. But it stayed. In the end, he'd left it, built the garden around it, planted his herbs to the side, placed his tools nearby. And over time, it became part of the scenery, a silent fixture, a lump in the landscape of his life. But this morning, something drew his attention to it again. The sun hit it differently. The frost clung to its edge. And Elias, now gray-haired, slower, humbler, felt a stirring. He shuffled over in his coat and boots, stood before the rock. It looked the same, and yet it didn't feel the same. He knelt slowly beside it, touching its surface with weathered fingers. It was cold, still, unchanged. But something inside him whispered, "This isn't about the rock." He exhaled, sat back, let his hands rest on his knees. For so long, that stone had reminded him of things he couldn't fix, wounds he couldn't heal, regrets he couldn't erase. It wasn't just a rock. It was every burden he had never fully placed in God's hands. He remembered his father, stern, silent. He remembered the years of working too much, speaking too little. He remembered Martha's last words, and how he hadn't known what to say in return. All of it. Heavy, immovable, like this stone. He looked up at the sky and whispered, not to the rock, but to the one beyond it. "Lord, I can't carry this anymore. No thunder, no quake, no divine hands lifting the rock into the air. Just a soft breeze and a thought. You were never meant to." Elias bowed his head, then did something he hadn't done in years. He opened his hands fully, palms up, empty, and said, with trembling breath, "Take it." He didn't need to feel the rock move, didn't need a miracle. He just needed to let go of needing to move it himself. And somehow, that was the miracle. Reflective pause. Breathe deeply. Close your eyes for a moment. What is your rock? What are you still trying to carry or fix, all on your own? Now imagine yourself opening your hands. Whisper to God, it's yours now. That evening, Elias didn't walk with heaviness. He didn't feel fixed or strong, but he felt light, peaceful. And as he passed by the garden at dusk, he saw the rock again. Still there, but no longer in the way. Bedtime takeaway. You don't need to move the burden alone. You only need to open your hands. God will carry what you cannot. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Genesis 28:16. It had snowed again in the night. Elias noticed it even before opening his eyes, as though the silence outside had deepened thick, padded, almost sacred. There was something about snow that always hushed the world, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. He pulled on his coat, stepped into his boots, and opened the door. The world was white, not just lightly dusted, but covered, thick and pure, like icing over a cake too holy to touch. The trees stood still in their winter coats. The river slowed beneath a glassy shimmer of ice, and the air smelled like quiet. He stepped outside onto the porch and paused. Then he saw them. Footprints. Just a few, clear, deliberate, leading from the woods to the edge of the cabin. Elias blinked, looked again. Not animal tracks, not deer, not raccoon. Human, barefoot. He stared, stunned. The prints were perfect, each toe, each heel, and they led straight to his door, then away again, disappearing into the trees. His breath came in a soft cloud. Who would walk barefoot in this? No traveler had come through in months. No neighbors this deep into winter. And no one, not even the foolish, would be without shoes in this cold. He stepped off the porch and followed them slowly, careful not to disturb their outline. They were real. They were recent. He stopped halfway between cabin and woods. The prints turned slightly here, as if the person had paused, maybe looked up at the window, maybe prayed. He didn't know, but something inside him stirred. Not fear, not confusion. Wonder. Could it be? He didn't dare say it aloud, but the thought bloomed gently in his chest. Was it him? Had Jesus come again? Not in dream, not in vision, but in snow. He followed a few more steps, but the trail ended suddenly beneath a pine tree, where snow had fallen heavier from the branches above. The prints were swallowed up in white. He stood there for a long moment, then turned back toward the cabin. The sky was beginning to brighten, soft gold threading through the clouds, and though he couldn't explain it, Elias smiled. Later that morning, by the fire, he wrote in his journal, first time in a long time, "The Lord passed by this morning, not in thunder, not in flame, but in footprints. And then, I think he wanted me to know. He's closer than I thought." Reflective pause. Sit quietly for a moment. Think of the places in your life where you assumed God was far away. Now imagine looking again and seeing the footprints. He was there. He is still, even when we didn't know it. That night, Elias placed a small bowl of warm water just outside his door. "Just in case," he whispered, smiling. "Your feet must be cold. Bedtime takeaway." You may not always feel him, you may not always see him, but Jesus walks towards you even when the world is frozen in silence. The wise ones took oil in jars along with their lamps. Matthew 25:4. It was late, later than Elias usually stayed awake. The fire had burned low in the hearth, casting long shadows along the cabin walls. His tea had gone cold. Outside, the moon had risen, full and pale, spilling light like soft silver across the snowy banks of the river. Inside, a single lamp flickered near the window. An old oil lamp, glass-smudged, wick uneven. It had belonged to Martha once. She had polished it with care, trimmed the wick properly, filled it with good oil, always the good oil. Elias had never quite managed it the same way. That night, as he sat reading an old page of scripture, the flame began to sputter. He looked up. The glass was fogging. The wick flickered wildly, then shrank. The smell of nearly spent oil drifted into the room. He rose slowly, walked over to the small cupboard near the stove and opened it. Empty. No more oil. He sighed quietly, not annoyed, not surprised, just resigned. He sat back down in the chair, now lit only by the soft embers in the fire and the glow of the moon outside. The lamp gave one final flicker, then went dark. For a moment, the room felt hollow. Not scary, just emptied. He thought of the parable, the 10 virgins waiting for the bridegroom. Some had extra oil, some did not. And when the groom came, those with no oil were left outside. Elias had always found that story a little harsh. He had struggled with the idea of missing Jesus. Just because your lamp had gone out. But tonight, in the quiet, he felt something different. Maybe the story wasn't just about readiness. Maybe it was about longing, waiting, trusting, watching, even in the dark. He whispered into the shadows, "Lord, what if my lamp goes out before you come?" And somewhere in his heart, a gentle thought rose, "Then I will come to you with mine." He smiled. Of course Jesus would not leave him in the dark. Even if the oil runs dry, even if his heart grows tired, even if his hands forget to trim the wick, Jesus would still come, with his own lamp, with light enough for both. Reflective pause. Close your eyes softly. Have you ever feared you didn't have enough left? Not enough faith, not enough strength, not enough light. Let this comfort you. Jesus brings his own flame. You are not left outside. Elias sat quietly, watching the shadows dance. The lamp was out, but peace remained, because the one he waited for was already near. And when Elias finally rose to go to bed, he didn't feel empty. He felt carried. Bedtime takeaway. Even when your lamp runs out, Jesus still finds you. His light never fades, and it's always enough. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us. 1 John 1:9. There are some things we carry not in our hands, but in the quiet corners of our hearts. Elias had never spoken of it, not to Martha, not to Jonah, not even in prayer, not fully. It lived like an old bruise, deep beneath the skin, tender even after all these years. A memory, a moment, a mistake. It had happened long ago, before the cabin, before the quiet, when life was fast and voices were loud and wounds came easier than apologies. He had said something, just one line, but it had cut deep. To Jonah, his only son, it wasn't the kind of thing people overhear. It was the kind that stays lodged in the soul of a boy. Words sharp with frustration, pride tangled with fear. A father trying to control when he should have listened. And when Jonah left, he took more than his bag. He took trust, he took presence, he took silence. Elias had written the letter once, but he never sent it. Because even when he tried to reach for forgiveness, he never asked for it directly. Not out loud, not fully. Something always stopped him. Shame, maybe, or fear of reopening what hurt. But now, on this quiet morning, something stirred. He was sitting by the fire, the light from the window casting a gentle glow over the old wooden floor. A bird chirped once, then flew off again. The world was still, and Elias felt it, a nudging, a whisper in the soul. It's time. He closed his eyes, folded his hands, and for the first time in decades, he said the words, not to his son, but to the one who loved them both. Lord, I was wrong. I was angry, and I used my strength like a shield instead of shelter. I didn't protect him. I wounded him. His voice trembled. I tried to lead him, but I crushed something instead. Silence followed. Not an accusing silence, a waiting one. And then, peace. He didn't see Jesus this time, didn't hear a voice, but he felt something loosen, not erased, but released, like a door creaking open, like a chain falling to the floor, like a father stepping toward a child not to punish, but to gather him home. And Elias wept, soft, grateful tears, not for what he'd lost, but for what was still possible. Reflective pause, close your eyes gently. Is there something you've never asked forgiveness for? Not because you don't believe, but because it felt too old, too heavy, too deep. Offer it now. The cross still stands. The door is still open. That evening, Elias did not dwell on his failure. He sat by the window and whispered softly, "Thank you for forgiving what I never had the courage to confess." And he knew it had never been too late. Bedtime takeaway. God doesn't wait for perfect words. He waits for open hearts, and he is always ready to forgive. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful servants. Psalm 116:15. Elias wasn't expecting to hear that name again. Not today, not after all these years. But sometimes the past drifts back like a gentle tide, unannounced. It started with the wind. There was something about it that afternoon, a certain lilt in its sigh, like a voice trying to be remembered. And then the memory came. His name was Samuel. They had been friends since boyhood, back when summers were long and worries were few. Back when laughter came easy and the worst pain they knew was a scraped knee or a scolding from a tired parent. Samuel had been taller, louder, the kind who made everyone feel at ease. They had fished together, climbed trees, shared secrets under the stars. And as they grew older, they stayed close, even as work came, even as life hardened. Until war, until separation, until the letter came. Elias still remembered it creased at the corners, stained by hands that trembled as they opened it. Samuel was gone. Not with fanfare, not with ceremony, just a line in black ink. "We regret to inform you." And then silence. He hadn't cried right away. He'd gone back to work, carried on, let the ache bury itself beneath the daily weight of things. But even now, decades later, Elias still remembered the way Samuel had laughed, the way he had prayed, not with many words, but with full heart. The way he once said, "If one of us goes first, make sure you light a candle for me." And Elias never had, until now. That evening, he found one of the smaller candles Martha had left in the drawer. He placed it by the window, lit it, watched the flame rise. It flickered softly like breath, and he whispered, "Rest now, old friend." Reflective pause. Think of someone you've lost, someone whose name still lives inside your heart. Let yourself remember to not with sorrow, but with love. Now whisper, "Thank you, Lord, for letting them be part of my story." As the candle burned low, Elias sat quietly. He didn't need visions or voices tonight. The memory was holy enough, and as the flame danced, he imagined Samuel smiling again, maybe watching from a place where pain no longer lived, where time no longer took anything away, and maybe, just maybe, he had never really been gone. Later, when Elias blew out the candle, he felt no sadness, only peace. And in the hush of the room, he felt a whisper, not from memory, but from the one who holds all things. You'll see him again. Bedtime takeaway. Those we've loved and lost are not lost at all. They are held by God and by us. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved. John 10:9. The memory came quietly like mist drifting in off the river at dawn. A hallway, a door, and a young Elias walking away from both. He had been 19, maybe 20, angry, restless, hungry for something bigger than the little town that held him. God had felt too quiet and too slow, and so Elias left church, prayer, all of it. He didn't shout about it, didn't write a manifesto, he just stopped showing up. Stopped asking, stopped listening. It wasn't rebellion, really. More like distance, like moving to a far room in the same house and slowly forgetting that anyone else lived there. For years, he built his life without the Lord at the center. Work, money, reputation. He was good, he told himself. He was kind, honest, respectable. But deep inside, there was a closed door, and he had turned the knob himself. It wasn't until much later, when Martha fell ill, that he returned. Not all at once, not with fanfare, but in pieces. A whisper, a tear, a candle lit without knowing why. And then, one night, he walked back to that door in his heart, the one he had closed so long ago. He remembered standing there, unsure, ashamed. Would he even open it, he had wondered, after so long? And then, he didn't need to knock, because the door opened first. No anger, no lecture, no questions. Just light and the sound of Jesus saying, "I've been waiting." That memory warmed Elias as he sat near the window now, watching the snow melt in slow patches along the path to the river. He whispered softly, "I thought I'd locked you out." And again, deep within, the answer came. You were never locked out. The door was never shut. Reflective pause. Take a slow breath. Have you ever believed the door was closed, that you had gone too far? Waited too long, failed too deeply? Listen now. The door is still open. It always has been. Jesus never left the porch. That night, Elias left his own cabin door unlatched. Just a crack. He smiled as he lay down to sleep. Because grace doesn't slam doors. It leaves them open, even for the prodigals, even for the forgetful, even for you. Bedtime takeaway. You don't have to knock hard. You don't have to explain. You don't even have to reach for the handle. Jesus already opened the door. Just come home. Even the darkness is not dark to you. The night shines like the day. Psalm 139:12. Sometimes night feels endless. Elias had never feared the dark, not really. But there are kinds of darkness deeper than the absence of light. There is the kind that settles into your chest, quietly, softly, like a curtain that won't lift. It began with a heaviness. No reason, no trigger, just a quiet weight behind his ribs, and as though his heart was remembering something his mind could not name. The clock ticked softly. The fire was still warm. But the minutes would not move. He tried tea. He tried reading. He even opened the window, thinking the night air might stir something loose. But the sky remained heavy, not stormy, just still. There was no moon that night, no stars, only blackness. Even the river seemed to hush, as if waiting. Elias sat in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, feeling a strange ache inside him, not quite sadness, not quite fear. Just waiting. He looked toward the eastern window, where morning usually hinted at itself. But tonight, there was nothing. No pale glow, no soft light creeping up behind the trees. He glanced at the clock. Still night. He looked again 10 minutes later. Still night. He blinked, rubbed his eyes. Still night. It began to frighten him, not in a loud way, but in a quiet, childlike way. Like the fear that maybe morning would never come, that maybe he had been forgotten. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he whispered like a boy in the dark, "Jesus, I know you're here, but could you remind me?" And then, nothing changed. No vision, no voice, no miracle, just the darkness. And yet, in the silence, he felt the chair beside him shift. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't dare, because he knew Jesus had come, not with answers, not with light, but with himself. And that was enough. They sat in silence together, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of breath, full of presence, full of God. Eventually, Elias fell asleep there in his chair. And when he woke, morning had come, soft and gold, snow melting slowly on the path, the river alive again, and the heaviness gone, or maybe just held. Reflective pause, Have you known a night like that? The kind where nothing helps, and time feels stuck and your soul feels unseen. Let this comfort you. Even when the morning feels delayed, Jesus sits beside you in the dark. That day, Elias didn't try to explain it. He didn't need to. Some nights don't teach. They just hold you until the sun returns. Bedtime takeaway. Jesus doesn't always end the darkness. Sometimes he just enters it and waits with you until the light comes again. I have called you by name. You are mine. Isaiah 43:1. Names carry a weight. They are more than letters. They are history, memory, identity. Elias had heard his name thousands of times in his life, shouted across a field, spoken tenderly by Martha, whispered in prayer. But only once had he felt it, deeply, truly, as if God himself had reached down, cupped his face, and said, "You, yes, you." It had happened years ago. He had never told anyone, but the memory never left. He had been walking by the river after a long week. Jonah was still young then. Martha was baking bread at home. And Elias, he was restless. He didn't know why, only that something inside him felt unfinished, hungry. He knelt near the water's edge and dipped his hands into the cold stream, watched the ripples, listened to the wind. And then it came, not in thunder, not in fire, but in stillness. His name, Elias, soft, clear, not with sound but with presence, a knowing, like the wind had touched something deeper than skin, like the trees had paused to let the voice pass through. And in that moment, he knew. He was seen, he was known, he was loved. It wasn't that God had just said his name. It was that God had meant it, years later. Sitting once again by the river now, with gray in his hair and more silence in his days, Elias whispered it again. Elias. Just to feel it. Just to remember. And he smiled. Because that name, his name, was safe with God. It always had been. Reflective pause. Whisper your name right now, aloud or in your heart. Let it settle. God sees you, not as a stranger, not as a failure, not as a number in the crowd, but by name. Yours, beloved. That night, Elias lay down with a calm he couldn't explain. He had been called, not for something to do, but simply for who he was. A child, a soul, a friend. And somewhere in the night, he heard it again, not with ears, but with his whole being. Elias, you are mine. Bedtime takeaway. God doesn't call the worthy. He calls the weary by name. And he calls you still. Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he. I will carry you. Isaiah 46:4. That night, Elias dreamed again. Only this time, there was no fire, no bread, no cabin walls to hold the silence. Only the river. He was lying on his back, not afraid, floating gently on the water. The sky stretched wide above him, soft with stars. The trees leaned in along the banks but made no sound. He was weightless. No pain in his knees. No ache in his chest, no heaviness in his thoughts. Just peace. The river didn't rush. It moved with kindness, with memory. It carried him not away from something but towards someone. And he felt it without words. He wasn't drifting. He was being carried by the one who had walked with him all along. There were no signs, no landmarks, just the sense of nearness. Like Jesus was in the water itself, the current, the warmth, the embrace. Elias opened his hands and let them rest on the water's surface. He didn't paddle, didn't steer. He simply trusted, and as the river curved gently around a bend, he saw it alight. Far off at first, but growing. A shoreline lit not by flame or moon, but by something eternal. Home, not the cabin, not a house, but something deeper. A place where everything he'd lost was found again, where no one was missing, where no time was wasted, where every wound had been kissed by grace. He didn't cry. There were no tears in that place, only recognition and rest. He whispered, "Lord, is this the end?" And in his spirit he felt the answer. "No, child, this is the beginning." Reflective pause. Imagine yourself floating, not sinking, not struggling, just being held by a river that knows where it's going, by a Savior who never lets go. That's what grace feels like. Elias stirred awake just before dawn. He didn't move right away. He lay still, eyes open, listening to the hush before sunrise. And he whispered, "Thank you for carrying me." Then slowly, he sat up, reached for his tea, and watched the real river outside the window begin to catch the first light of day. It flowed softly, faithfully, and he smiled. Bedtime takeaway. You don't have to make it to the shore on your own. Let grace carry you. Let the river take you all the way home. Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Matthew 25:23. The morning began like any other. Soft light spilled through the window. The fire crackled low in the hearth. The river moved with quiet rhythm, faithful as breath. But something was different. Elias didn't rise at his usual hour, didn't light the lamp, didn't warm the tea. He sat instead still and wrapped in his old wool blanket, head resting gently against the cushion of his chair. Face turned toward the light. His Bible lay open on his lap. A candle flickered beside him, and in the hush of the cabin, a great peace filled the room. He hadn't spoken much the night before, only a single whisper, barely audible. "I'm ready." Not desperate, not afraid, just ready. Like a traveler whose bags are already packed. Like a child who sees the porch light left on. Outside, the snow had melted completely. Spring had arrived quietly in the night. The tree by the river, the waiting tree, had sprouted its first green bud. The boat still rested behind the cabin, unfinished and yet complete, because the journey it was meant for had already begun. Inside, Elias's chest rose and fell once more, then stilled. No storm, no flash, only stillness. But if someone had been there truly listening, they might have heard it. The softest whisper in the air, gentler than wind, stronger than time. Welcome home. Not a goodbye, but a beginning. He wasn't alone. Jesus was there, not waiting at the shore, but having walked every step with him. And now, he opened his arms, and Elias finally fully rested. The river flowed, the birds sang, the candle burned low, and a life, long and quiet, was gathered gently into the arms of eternity. Reflective pause. Close your eyes. Let every breath soften. You are not lost. You are not too late. You are being led. Home. There will come a day when your journey ends. But on that day you will not walk alone. The one who called you by name will whisper, "You're home now." Final bedtime takeaway. There is a place where no sorrow lingers, where every tear is dried and every name is known. Jesus has prepared it for you, and when the time is right, he will carry you there gently, gladly. forever. Even Sifbe, you've made it through the story, beloved one. Elias's journey may have ended, but yours is still being gently written by the same hand, with the same grace. Tonight, if your heart is weary, if the night feels long, just remember this. You are not forgotten. You are not too late. And you are never alone. Jesus is by your side, in the silence, in the waiting, in the gentle unfolding of your days. So now, close your eyes, let go, and rest in the arms of the one who says, "You've carried enough. Come home to me." Good night, dear soul, and may peace wrap around you like a warm blanket. We'll be here again tomorrow by the river with Jesus.